Hi, folks. This is Scott Haskin, host of the HaskinCast Podcast, Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast, and soon to be a guest host on a third podcast that I was asked to join after it had already started. I don't know where in the timeline we are on that when this will come out, so I don't know if that's been announced or not. If it has, it'll be in the show notes. If it hasn't been announced, it won't, but keep checking back because sooner or later it'll be there. You can also go to my website, www.scotthaskin.com, and you can see all the things I have going on. Right now, the Uriah Heep podcast is kind of on hold. I've covered all the songs that they've recorded and released in the studio, including all the bonus tracks, the album that they did as Spice before they were Uriah Heep, as well as Live in '73, most of which I covered with Dave. And so that's kind of on hold waiting for the new album to come out. I'm hoping it'll be sometime after the first of the year. As soon as it does, as soon as I get my copy, of course, I'll jump on and start doing the reviews as well and get those out to you guys. Where it'll go from there, I have no idea. Maybe some interviews, who knows. My book trilogy will start coming out this year. The Universal Court Book 1 should be out, I'm hoping, mid-November. Again, I don't know exactly what the release date of this episode is going to be because I keep getting interview requests and I'm kind of like peppering them in, and I don't want to do all four of these in a row because if you're not, if the audience, not everyone is a fan of Cobra Kai, maybe you don't have Netflix, maybe you're not into that kind of story. I don't want you to not enjoy the show for an entire month because I'm doing like back-to-back episodes on a topic that you're not interested in. So I'm sure I'll pepper in a couple of album reviews here. So I'm not exactly sure what day this is going to come out as I'm taping this intro. So check back. But in the meantime, the book should be out, I'm hoping, for mid-November for the first one. And then I'll figure out whether I'm doing them every month or 2 months after that until all three are out. Very excited after almost 13 years since I finished the original draft of what was I think, 14-page screenplay to turn this into a complete book trilogy and finally get it out after all this time. Whew. It's been a chore, this one. And I'm also working on a new album that should be due out sometime in January. I'm just working on the recording right now. I've got a few keyboard tracks and some bass tracks left, and we'll have all those done in November. I'll spend December mixing and mastering that, and then it will come out in January. So keep an eye out for that. And again, you guys can always go to the website, www.scotthaskin.com, and check out what I have going on. In the meantime, let's get back to the second part of my conversation with John Mottola from the Deep Purple podcast. And let me just say, if you guys aren't really into Deep Purple, check out the podcast anyway, because there's so much fun to listen to. They just have a great back and forth. They cover a lot of albums besides just Deep Purple, and they have a lot of fun episodes as well. I've been a guest several times on the show, but they cover all the Whitesnake, Rainbow, Glenn Hughes, the whole family and branches of the relation. So check them out, Deep Purple Podcast. Cheers. The thing about Creaks' backstory, though, that I find interesting, since you bring up the musical point, is I can't remember what the reference was, but it was on the Deep Purple podcast. You guys were talking about how it gets really annoying every time that there's like a 60s movie that they have to play a 60s rock song. And of course, they're playing, I think it was Sunshine of Your Love, going back into the, the Vietnam scenes with young Creaks. And I thought about you guys, I'm like, yep.
Well, yeah, it's like, hey, look, it's the 60s.
Exactly. But so here's my question for you on the way that the season ending for the whole season was. They take down Silver, they're out there, and and Johnny says, I hope that Silver gets to share a cell with Crease. And then the detective's like, oh, you guys didn't hear what happened. But what was it that he told them? Was it that Crease was killed or that Crease escaped prison?
Well, my first thought was that he was going to tell him that Crease had died in prison. Mm-hmm. When you look at the scene, you could look at it two different ways. Is that he's like, oh, you didn't hear what happened? And then they cut to what had happened, which that would have been in the past. Or he said, oh, you didn't hear what happened. And then they cut to what actually happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, so I guess if you really looked at the scene, you're like, okay, like the scene, was it a flashback, or was it a flash forward?
Exactly.
What happened?
I think he told them that Crease died.
That's what I thought, because I think that would set up the next season to be a little bit more intriguing, because if they're under the impression that he's dead, then he could just be under cover of darkness, as opposed to, oh, didn't you hear he escaped, and then the whole thing of like, oh, he could be out there anywhere. It's like it's kind of unnerving, but it doesn't really, I don't feel it lends itself to kind of a more interesting story.
I think they need another moment where they think they can be comfortable and then find out they can't. Like, okay, everything's good, let's go out and party. Oh, this turned into a shit show. Like, I think they need another moment like that. Because going into season 6, here's the problem. They don't have an antagonist anymore. Silver's in jail, right? He's going to be tied up in courts for a while. They think Crease is dead, or at least he's in jail, something along those lines. There's no more Cobra Kai because everybody walked out. So except for that female sensei that he hired, who did, and she didn't seem like she was going to stick around, because her whole thing was to get to that big tournament.
Yeah, Sakai Takai, I think, or right. I can't remember what it was called.
Sakai Takai, I think.
Sakai Takai, yep.
But her students quit, or at least some of her students quit. We don't actually know if everybody in Cobra Kai walked out or not. So they may or may not still be a thing. But basically, we have no antagonist at this point. So they're going to start season 6 going, hey, everything's good now. We're all fine. Everybody's getting along. Robbie's with, Miyagi-Do. Tori will come over and, everything will be fine. Where's the conflict? There's got to be something.
Maybe or maybe not. I mean, they could be. I feel like if this is going to be the last season, which I believe it will be.
I hate everything about that phrase.
So do I, but I have to be realistic. All right, but say it's going to be the last season. Then you have, like you said, everybody's getting along. All the bad guys are taken out. I think that I don't know what's going to go on with Crease, because you keep thinking that he's going to turn it around, or maybe he's going to kind of do like a kind of a 180 like Johnny did, and eventually join forces with them and be like, you know what, I was wrong. But that him and Terry's bond goes back to when they knew each other when they were younger. So I mean, even though he sent him to jail, would it really be that easy for him to turn his back on him? The other thing is, we know that Terry Silver has infinite amounts of resources. Like when they were taking him away in the cop car, the first thing I thought was he's going to be out in like 5 minutes. Like he'll probably he probably has politicians, like he'll pull strings. He'll probably make the bail, because I mean, what did they really get him on? Because he didn't actually kill anybody.
True. They could, and they could say attempted murder, but depending on what the laws are in California, if they have the make my day laws, he even said, you broke into my house, so now I can do whatever.
Right. I mean, he was on his property both times.
Yeah. And
Cobra Kai, he owned it and he owned his house. So it's not like he broke into somebody else's property. He was on his property and everybody else was trespassing.
And they also did a brilliant job setting up exactly what you just said, because when Daniel and Johnny went to go visit Crease in jail, he said, Crease has the guy in his pocket. So he's already got politicians, judges. You're right. You're absolutely right. But I think he'll be tied up in litigation, but he'll be out doing stuff. And his only thing that he's got left is to get revenge on the people that just hurt him.
Right. I think that's what's going to happen is that we might have an episode or two with him being tied up and then eventually being free, because really what's his crime? I mean, he could, what's he going to like pay a fine for having a teenage karate tournament rigged?
Right.
I mean, you can't go to jail for that. I mean, assault and battery, maybe.
Yeah.
Even if it was on his own property, or like you said, attempted murder. But it's like, I can't, with all the resources and the money that he has, I can't imagine that he's going to be tied up long enough for him to not be like a major force or threat in the next season.
Well, I think the two things that they do potentially have that would be legitimate charges would be what he did to, what's that guy's name? Not Scorpion.
Chosen?
Stingray.
Oh, Scorpion. Oh, right. Stingray.
So, because Stingray said, everything I said, I was under duress. Here's the truth. So now he's telling that detective that. So that's I think, why they arrested him.
Obstructing justice. Yeah.
But they've also got the arson. So they've got him attempted murder on
if they
Stingray,
can prove that.
If they can prove the arson. So those would, I think, be the two major things that they could potentially have as like legitimate charges. But the detective said with this list of charges. So I'm like, what's on that list?
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, because I could only think of those two things. I'm like, I don't know what else he actually did that would be breaking the law. I mean, he there was a lot of dick moves, but what did he actually do that was illegal?
Well, the other thing that I'm thinking of too, well, who knows? I mean, maybe he was evading taxes and all that other stuff. Who knows? It could have been that. But the other thing I thought of is Crease was breaking out of jail. They're taking Silver away. That basically cleared Crease. He probably, if he sat around for another day or two, he probably could have gotten out,
right,
for being falsely accused. And so now I'm just like, well, okay, so now he's out. He's going to face that charge of breaking out, even though he was found innocent. So how does that work when you break out of jail, like this shy of being cleared of committing a crime?
Well, yeah, I mean, and think about like people that got arrested for marijuana possession right before it became legal.
Right.
Like what happened to those? Are they still in jail? Did they get like, well, if it's been within 30 days, we're going to let you go. Like, I don't know how that works, but this is almost the like Twilight Zone brilliance with which this show is written, because it's like you were so close and you didn't know it. You thought you got screwed over with every possible chance you had. So now you're going to take things into your own hands. But if you just would have waited like 5 seconds, it would have all been fine. Like that is the irony that I just love in the writing of this show. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, there are some things that I don't like. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, they're minor points. I mean, when you watch any kind of movie, TV show, you have to have a suspension of disbelief.
Right.
Obviously. So Miguel goes to Mexico to find his dad. First city he goes to, somebody's like, "Hey, nice to see you, Hector." And he's like, "Hector?" And it's like, really? You go to Mexico and the first guy you see, his name is Hector. That's your dad. Well, and what are the freaking odds?
Well, and you know that Mexico is only that beach, right? It's not a very big place. Like everybody that you could possibly want to find is like right within 5 minutes. Like, I was like, there is a lot of plot conveniences, I think, in this show.
Yeah, that bothered me.
Yeah. That bothered me. And then he just happens to end up behind a dumpster where his actual father is, and the guy just happens to call him by name.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hector, Dad?"
Yeah, okay. Miguel, how many Miguels are down there in Mexico? I mean, come on, right? Or when Johnny was driving with Robbie, thank you. I forgot his name. And he's like, "Look, I got us these badass t-shirts." And they were like FBI female body inspector. And I'm like, they're going to wear those and people are going to think they're the FBI somewhere. I mean, to me, I could see that one from a mile away. It wasn't a plot convenience or something. It was just kind of one of those things where like, I know what they're setting this up for. Although it was fun. It was fun to watch it.
It was, but in realistically, if you were, and I've never been to Mexico. I've never worked with the FBI, so I don't know. I'm kind of speculating here. But if somebody walked in with an FBI T-shirt, would you actually think they were with the FBI? Like, I don't think they go walking around with T-shirts advertising that they're with the FBI.
That's true. I didn't think of that. They're just like, "It's the FBI, get them." And and you got a 50-year-old man and like a 17-year-old boy with FBI T-shirts on, and you're like, "Oh, that's got to be the FBI."
And there's all these people standing behind them, seeing that it says female body inspector on the back. So I don't know. There are things like that where I'm like, yeah, I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but
well, I think it was the whole Mexico sequence that was a little bit of a stretch, because even after he found out what kind of man his father was, and he goes crying out of the bar, and then he turns around and there's Johnny in the middle of the street. It's like, again, of all the streets in Mexico, there's Johnny just waiting for him.
Yeah,
like Miguel, like.
Good thing it's not that big of a place, right?
Oh yeah, it's tiny, like Rhode Island.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically the size of Rhode Island, maybe half.
And I've gotten lost here too. So I mean,
right. Well, there you go. That whole episode I thought was kind of a throwaway, but I honestly think it was setting up something bigger. I think one of the ending points of the whole thing is going to be Johnny going after his dad.
You think?
Yeah, because they kind of set that up when Miguel asked him about it. He's like, I don't know that I want to know the answer. I think it was when they were having burgers across the street from the hospital. And Miguel had asked him about that, and he was really hesitant. But then they had that flashback to where he had that box of his dad's stuff, the Action Jackson doll and the beer can and all that. And
right.
I think they're setting that up to somewhere before the whole series wraps up. He's going to have to go after his dad. He's going to have to clear up that part of his life.
Well, with him and Carmen having a baby on the way, and that family unit, them and Miguel and Robbie all being together as a nuclear family, as it would be, there's got to be something there there's got to be like that question, like you said, is he going to try and find out his own roots, or is something going to threaten that, like a new villain? Is because everything can't just be smooth sailing all the way to the baby being born,
right?
And them preparing for it. There's got to be some kind of like antagonist in there, or something happening. Otherwise, it's just going to be boring.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'm waiting for the storyline where it's not his kid. Because remember, she was dating that Australian guy right before Johnny. And he had said, when Johnny saw him at the restaurant, he said, yeah, she's good for a couple of hookups and then I'll dump her. So
did they hook up yet?
Well, we don't know. That's the thing. We don't know.
I feel that it would be, I mean, that could be a way that it could go if that would kind of test them. But I feel like it is Johnny's baby.
It could
and
be.
the one way that I did think they were going to go, which it did throw me for a loop, was the whole pregnancy test thing. And he was all nervous. And then the whole montage of him getting the apartment ready and being ready for it. And then she came in and she's like, so I took the test. And I'm like, after all that, she's going to be like, we're not having a baby, because that's 50% of the time. That's the way the whole sitcom or movie trope goes. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And I was totally ready for it to be like that, and be like, well, you know what? It's at least it shows that you were ready to man up and all that kind of stuff. And instead she's like, we're having a baby. And I was like, oh shit, that really threw me for a loop. Like I thought it was totally going to go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
So good job faking me out.
and another, along those lines, another fake out. And I had predicted this for season 5. I had said that somehow, because Crease doesn't have any resources, he's going to have to team up with Daniel and Johnny. And the next thing you know, there's Daniel and Johnny going to the prison to see him. And I thought, oh my God, I was right. No, like they set that up so well to make it look like they were going to work with him. And then Daniel handed him that fuck you piece of paper. I think that was a mistake. I think it should have said no mercy on it. I know it would have been a little bit more ironic, but I love the way they set that up. I mean, they did such a great job with that, but I was close, but they again, you think everything's going one way and then zap, it twists a different way.
Well, I always thought that Daniel was a man of his word, or a man of his honor. So I thought that I was kind of surprised. That was another 50-50 where I was like, is the like when he took the paper, I was there's no way they're doing this dramatic buildup that he's going to turn it over and there's going to be a phone number on it. It's going to be something like, haha, fooled you. But that just kind of cemented for me that in this season anyways, I feel like Daniel was his most insufferable, because I mean, it was to the point where his wife had to run away from him. She's just like, enough. And he's like, but don't you see, we have to beat him. And I remember sitting there, I'm sitting there going like, why do you have to beat him? Like, just give it up, dude. Right. It's like, you got to calm down. Like beat him at what at this point? I'm just
he basically became Johnny in this season. Right. And even Johnny was like, you're being me. What's the matter with you? You're not like this. And Chosen was like, this isn't you, And I liked that turnaround scene where he went to Johnny's apartment after
after his wife took the trip with the kids or left to go visit her sister and everything. And he's just like, oh, man, he goes, I don't know what to do. And Johnny gave him advice, and he's just like, thanks for giving me, thanks for the banquet and the perspective.
Right.
And to me, that sounded like a real Daniel type of thing.
He's like, you're coming here out of the blue. You smell like alcohol. And like, that was normally you.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I love when they do those like reversals things too. I think they do such a great job with them.
Yeah.
One thing that kind of bothered me though, I love the way that they did the last tournament, right? Where Silver had paid off the official.
Yeah.
I thought they did a great job of pulling that off because you really did not know. The only clue that they gave you was when Silver said to Tori, trust me, this guy is not going to end the match on a technicality. But that wouldn't really make you go, oh, he paid him off.
Right.
That may just say, oh, I'm familiar with this referee. I know he doesn't do that. So I thought that was a great twist but again, the way that they did it. So Tori just happens to walk by while they're having the discussion at the exact moment. The door just happens to be cracked open that neither one of them exit through. That's just like a magical third door to this one small office. And it just happens to be cracked open so that she can hear it. So that was another one of those, plot convenience things. But what I didn't like was that when Silver left the room, he turned away to the right. And then the referee like ducked his head down and turned away to the left so that neither one of them looked out the door to see Tori standing there.
Right.
And that seemed really awkward. Like that seemed really forced staging to me.
Well, because literally nobody leaves a conversation like that with the door cracked open without looking over at the cracked open door.
Well, yeah, exactly. You got to make sure no one's coming. You're going to close the doors when you walk into a room like that. So that felt a little bit forced. But where it got worse for me was the fight in front of the Sagai Tai where he paid off the referee, and the referee kept looking over at him and nodding, and Silver was nodding back at him. I'm like, could you guys be more obvious that, first of all, he's making horrible calls. Even the people that are there to judge them are like, what's going on here? But they didn't step in and do anything about it, which kind of bothered me either. They weren't like, hey, this is not a fairly judged match, so we can't judge you guys on it. So that kind of bothered me. But it was just so obvious. Like, how many times are they going to look at each other and nod? And like, how are the judges not seeing that?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, they set it up for Tori to see it, and that was her like, okay, now I see he's doing it again. I can't be a part of this, and that's why she left. I get that, but I think she could have done that with one quick glance over, making it obvious, because he was making the same calls the other guy did.
Right, but they had to hit you over the head with it. So
yeah, it felt a little over the top for me.
Yeah.
But I love the idea behind him doing it. And I just don't like the way he got away with it, because it seems like, these people are like the elite. They absolutely know the rules and should have seen, that was a bad call. She was not over the line when she was hit, or no, Sam definitely hit her. That should be her point. But they were just like, yeah, he can do whatever he wants, and we'll judge it on this idiot. Let's talk about Hawk.
Okay.
My God, what a storyline this kid has had, and what a great actor.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, they kind of brought him almost full circle. They really could have had this kid not develop, but he started off as the shy kid with a deformity, and then he became super confident and cocky. But then by this season, he's kind of in between. He's gone back to being himself, but still being badass at the same time.
It's like he's found that balance that they talk about a lot on the show. He's found that I can be tough, but I can actually be like a good person at the same time now. And I think he needed that head shaving or the haircut to realize that he's not the most powerful thing in the world.
Right. Like I think that I think it was that moment I think it was the fight scene in, was it the LaRusso's house? Was it the last season or the one before, where he finally looks over at, how come I'm forgetting
Dimitri?
all the names now? Dimitri. Yeah.
No, that was the episode with Ali. Yeah, when they went to the LaRusso house.
Right. And there was this choice where he's just like, is he going to defend like his old friend, who he had recently broken his arm or he had hurt him, or is he gonna stay down the path he's going? And he decided that he was going to team up with Dimitri, and that's when you realize that he was going back to his roots. Like he could still be the nerd, that like the nerdy kind of kid who loved all the Dungeons and Dragons or whatever those guys were into, but still be Hawk, the Hawk character that he created for himself. Like he could still be a badass and a tough guy and stand up for himself, but still be who he was at the core.
And I love that they had him have those moments of, am I doing the right thing previous to that? Like when they were in the laser tag arena, when they had that fight there, when he broke Dimitri's arm, right before he did it, you could tell he was having some conflict. Yeah. And there were a couple moments where he had that. And I like that he's struggling with the fact that he knows he's a bully and he shouldn't be doing this, but also he's badass and he's really having an internal conflict. I really like that arc.
The other thing that I like too, since we're talking about him, is Dimitri, who is the big nerd of the group. How they really didn't, I like how they didn't fast track him to being really awkward and the nerdy kid who didn't know karate. And they really took their time getting him to that point where he could finally fight, because now he knows karate and he could be in the tournament, he could defend himself, but they didn't make him a total badass. Like he still went over to Johnny's as like the cell phone geek. Yeah. And, and everything like that. So they really, like, I like the fact that it's like in one scene, he was the nerd. And then all of a sudden, like you cut to the next episode and he's a karate badass all of a sudden. Yeah. Like they made his transition really realistic, is that he's still like the him that he always was. But there was that point where I think he got his first successful kick. I don't know if it was when they were in the meat freezer or the freezer.
I think it was the school ice cream fight. The school fight when he put Hawk through the.
Was it?
Oh no! That was the first successful one. I think you're right. That was
when they were in the ice cream freezer.
Yeah, you're right.
And he got his first successful kick, but then I think he fell down again. And it's like, all right, you're getting there. But it really, I like how some of the scenes were realistic with those characters, as they didn't just turn them into like, oh, all of a sudden they know karate, when for the whole previous like 3 seasons or whatever, you didn't know karate.
And I kind of feel like they did rush that a little bit with Miguel in the beginning, because he really wasn't studying with Johnny that long. And then all of a sudden he goes to this fight to defend Sam in the cafeteria, and he's like taking on 4 guys, and he's a total badass. And I'm like, I don't know that you would have those instincts to know that somebody was coming up behind you. How did Johnny train you to get that? Because it was only the 2 of them. He couldn't have like sneak attacks and stuff in a room where there's only 2 people. So I kind of felt that was one of those moments, like in most martial arts or any kind of sports movies, really, where they all of a sudden can do things that like, I don't really know that you've been working at this long enough to be able to have that skill. I
mean, maybe they had to fast track that for the first season, because they didn't have the whole ensemble cast as big as it grew to this point anyways.
And he's got to win the tournament by the end of the episode, and there's only 10 episodes. So yeah. So they got to do that. But they also, I think they took their time with some of the other characters too, like how Anthony was bullying that other kid. I can't remember his name either. Why am I so bad with the names today? I can't. I'll think of it. I know I have his name written down somewhere.
But he was like Robbie's protege.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for you to find his name.
Kenny,
that's it. Yep. So when he was Kenny's bully, and then Kenny turned around and now he's bullying Anthony, it's the same thing, is that Anthony's grown up in this household where his dad, his sister, they studied karate, and he's just like, I'm going to play video games and eat ice cream until he apparently hit puberty and leaned out a little bit, because I almost didn't recognize him in the new season. But
I thought it was a different actor at first.
Yeah. But they also didn't fast track him to learning karate. I mean, you see him as part of the ensemble doing all the moves and everything later on at the dojo. But when Kenny turned around, he's just like, and he's relentless. He won't forgive him. And it just really bothered me, because I'm just like, this kid has definitely, he admitted his mistakes. He's trying to be a better person. He thought that they were good, and then they punch him and they push him into the water tube and everything like that. And this poor kid still doesn't know how to defend himself. He's still paying for the sins of his past.
Well, and he tried to apologize twice.
Yeah,
right before the big chase into the library, he was saying, "Hey, you know what? I've been thinking about things. I've been a dick. I'm sorry." And Kenny could have just said right there, but he was so angry, so built up with rage, that there was nothing Anthony could have done by that point to have appeased him, And
it's almost like he was a culmination of Daniel and Johnny from the first movie, because he was the new kid that moved in. He was kind of quiet. He was getting pushed around. And then by the current season, he's such a powerful bully with this kind of tunnel vision that nothing can change his mind. And then by that last episode where Robbie went over to him and he's like, Kenny, he's like, not now. And he just kind of walked away. So that there's got to be something else. Like he's got to rethink everything, because Cobra Kai, Silver, like everything that he was taught that made him what he is, he found out was a lie. And so now I think he's got to process that. And I'm hoping that he's going to come back and be Robbie's friend again, be on the side of the right. And eventually I see that happening, and him finally forgiving Anthony, maybe begrudgingly. But I mean, we've seen more unlikely friendships form in this show. So I think that's going to happen.
And I agree with you. And I think too, that had he not been in Cobra Kai, when Anthony first approached him and said, I've been thinking about everything, like right before the library chase, I think he would have accepted it. I think it was because of what Cobra Kai had programmed him with. He's like, no, I got to get even with you. I don't need your apologies. I'm going to fuck you up.
Yep. I mean, he took that no mercy dead serious.
Absolutely.